Hello, and welcome to Legit Lit Volume 2. We're waiting for everyone to be let back into the main room. My name is Michael, and I run the Muse Writers Center, and also am very excited to be part of this reading today. So this is a reading and discussion inspired by the recent and necessary protests calling for racial equality and opportunity around our nation. The injustice that is being called out in our communities has far-reaching effects in the African-American community and in every community in the nation, as equity and fairness affects us all and affects the health of our civil society. So our guests are going to read from their works. Each of our guests will have a short period of time to read, and after that reading, we'll have a discussion among the panelists, as well as take questions from the comment section of the live stream on Facebook. So if you're watching this on Facebook, go to the main Muse page and please enter your questions there. I want to have a small disclaimer about people's works. I'm not sure if everyone will be reading published works or unpublished works. So just, I'll put it out there to the community who's watching that some of these works might be unpublished. And if they are, the author has all rights to those works, and you're not to take them and share them without permission from the writer. In addition, this event does not constitute a publication for that writer. This is just a reading, so we're not taking away anyone's rights by doing that. So I know that we're having some technical issues with one of our guests, and maybe we'll get that cleared up in a second. But before we start, I wanted to just have a quick note about the Muse Writers Center in Norfolk. We've moved all of our classes and events online. This summer, we have 78 classes online. And tomorrow we have another reading celebrating the launch of Diane Zinna's debut novel, also live here on Facebook. That'll be at 7 p.m. I also want to thank Sierra, who is our intern. She is producing this event behind the scenes, and we're very excited to have her help us with everything. So what we're going to do is I'll introduce each of the readers, and when the reader is reading, I ask the presenters to mute themselves, and I see you're all muted right now. That's fine. So I'll mute myself in a second too. So our first presenter has sent in a video. She is Desiree Cooper, and she's a 2015 Kresge Artist Fellow. Desiree is a former attorney, Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist, and community activist. She's an evocative speaker on the themes of racial and gender equality, reproductive freedom, family positive public policy, and the welfare of women and girls. As a full-time caregiver for her aging parents, she writes widely about women, self-care, and reinvention. So Sierra is going to now show the video that she prepared for us, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
With nothing else to feed him, she pushed the last slice of bread into his baby bird mouth. Take this, eat. She taught him how to pray as he trembled in the bathtub where the bullets couldn't find him. They said it together every night as they practiced living on their knees. If I should die before I wake. He didn't die, such was the shield of her love. She willed it, and he thrived, a rose in the desert. Day by day, she reminded him, I love you with all my heart, all my mind, and all my strength. Blessed are those who are another's joy. But in the valley of shadows, the serpents slithered. Samaritans never stopped to help. Fishes and loaves did not multiply. Suffer, little children. A table was always set for the privilege of the enemy. In the house of many mansions, the rich hoarded their manna. He wore his coat of color, a gift from his mother. He looked good. This is my body. This is my body. In his pride, He was a target for the rulers of the fish, the fowl, and all other living creatures. They burst into his front door, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. They threw her begotten son into the yard, a pig in the dirt. In the door sill, his mother wept. Giving his last breath back to her, he despaired. Why hast thou forsaken me?
Thank you, Desiree. We're very happy that you were able to share that with us. So I'm going to keep on moving to our next reader. Our next reader is Remica Bingham Risher. Remica is the author of 3 poetry collections, including Starlight and Error and What We Ask of Flesh. She is the Director of Quality Enhancement Plan Initiatives at Old Dominion University, which means she helps faculty integrate writing into the classroom and lives in Norfolk, Virginia. Let's welcome Remica.
Hey, it's so, thanks. Thanks for that. It's so interesting. I haven't talked to Des in a while, I haven't seen her in a while, but I had already decided that I was going to be reading some pieces for mothers. I think so many of us, I know Des is invested in the care of her parents. She's a grandmother, she's a mother. And so many of us are thinking about the ways we are connected to others, particularly this summer. With so much that's happening. And also I'll have to leave halfway through the reading because of kind of the necessity of mothering. So I'll start with a poem with that title. It's called Mother Necessity. My most recent book, Starlight and Error, came out a few years ago. It's love poems, which I think we're kind of desperately in need of, meditating on joy as much as we meditate on other things. And so it's a book about getting married and inheriting children. And this was part of that inheritance. Mother Necessity. He is concerned about the way words work. If his sister will be angry, if his father will. He asks me over homework if I've talked to them again. I tell him no one minds the word mom around here, but that's what I call my real mom too, he says. What if it gets confused? It won't, I tell him. She and I are never in the same place at the same time. He tries it out in a rhyme. Be calm, Mom, when he is late to bed or early morning howling up the stairs. And sometimes I forget who I've become. What a strange life this is. In part, who you think you are, but mostly what others deem nameless, then newly named, ghost of someone's dreams. Like, thanks, guys. Like Des, I think too, particularly as mothers of, little Black boys, I certainly never thought, that pulling hoodies out of somebody's closet, as worried in a pandemic about my son being in the streets for other reasons, as I am now. But in 2014, while I was still getting used to parenthood, one of my oldest and dearest friends was killed by police in Phoenix. And so I was fearful, much like that piece that kind of Des graced us with. There was also all these different images of who that boy was. And even then, I continued to meditate on mothers. This is getting ready for the heartache to come, or a body intercepting light. And it ends with a line from a Four Tops song, Standing in the Shadows of Love. So if you don't remember it, go listen to that. It's a good song. Grief is a half-sung ballad. The mothers I've known are bellowing into stilled ears or stitches in the sewn-up backs of blue Black boys. There are various sites of trauma: wounds, needles, pipes, badges, ropes unraveling, all wavelengths of visible light, prison fights, the devil's busy hands, bodies aimed when they leave like bullets or planes rarely become letters, tulips, fireworks, any welcome opening, rarely live as good, as free, as long as we hope. The women enduring this must become saints or blameworthy, miracles or memories. The Bible says men are gods or gleaming, but mothers shelter the in-between, ghost children, wandering the streets of every generation, Father God, Son God, Holy Spirit, flexing in photo albums, toys in the curio, lighters, guns, and flasks carved with initials, all the left behind things gathered around a table. Mothers singing. Didn't I do the best I could? Didn't I? And I'll end with a poem that meditates on joy. And because, you know, all of us are home, can't go to the theater as much as we would like anymore, can't do some of the things we would like for a little while to take care of each other. I like to meditate on a time when we could and it changed us. We see The Lion King on Broadway. I enter the pride. Our girl is telling the boys to pose near the theater doors. We have traveled to the Minskoff in New York, and the children are finally elated. They have been trying to teach me their ways. They wrestle and weary one another, bending and binding love, but I am useless in my tenderness. Until this, I have orchestrated the day trip of dreams. Herald Square gleams like a lost enchantress. As we scuttle and preen, she tries pashminas and caps, designer shades, everything neon at once. When our tickets have been taken and they step into the circle, for a flash of moment, she takes the journey in. It is only a measure before the music starts. While we head to our seats, she says, "This is amazing, all you've done to get us here. It must have taken hours." Years, I think, years. But she is grateful, and I am finally useful. As the curtain goes up, everything the light touches is ours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Oh, wow. So our next reader is Daniel Pearlman. And Daniel's work has been published in numerous journals, including the Washington Review, Phoebe, Grasslands Review, Poets Domain, Beltway, and others. He shows an attention to detail, small details from natural to urban settings. He's taught English and creative writing at Norfolk State University since 1996, as well as the Muse Writers Center occasionally. Daniel is the author of A Bird in the Hand is a Dumb Bird, released in 2011. So let's welcome Daniel Pearlman. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Daniel.
Okay, I hope that did it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming out, and I appreciate being a part of this. Let's start with a poem called Sidewalk Sweeping the Morning After the 2016 Election. We just have to keep going, people, and that's really what, what's going on here. Sidewalk sweeping the morning after the 2016 election. Clammy, 50 degrees. Wind in my face feels right somehow, like a splash of water waking up. Is loss a lesson or a chain around the neck? A hook through the cheek? Is Earth anything more than a speck in the system? I remove my hoodie and recall it feels good to work in short sleeves in the cold. Megalodons went extinct millions of years ago. Meteors and earthquakes and political pendulums will swing the world, and like Hank Aaron, the world will swing back and break records. I dump the leaves and needles. Lots left to do. The live oak fears not the lightning. Like the clearing sky and my warm chest, one cannot steal that which is unpossessable. Thanks. Okay, this one's in my backyard, Earth Day. And, you know, the pandemic's going, and so I'm just kind of hiding in my yard on Earth Day. Earth Day Contradictions 2020. I sit in my little backyard and fail to follow the two cardinals contending for territory with song and flight. Blocking the neighbor's light, trees push long and high, holly and hemlock, cedar and poplar, maple and magnolia. 8th acre accidental bird sanctuary, orioles in the cavey camellia, waxwing popping berries, dove nest deep in the windowsill, behind the brick the air conditioner sleeps on. Even a redtail drops by twice in a while. If they can thrive in an old city, then the plague will pass eventually. Sparrows hop along the roof gutter to the fur. The cardinals land in the ivy atop the shed next door. I defend destruction with the determination of the victims. I am an avian admirer and melodious liar. Maybe their songs are mocking me. People say it's wrong to put out seed and bread for the birds. Sometimes I do it anyway. Thanks. Okay, one more. This is from my new book. Hey, let's do some promoting here if I can. This one's called Normal They Napalm the Cotton Fields. It came out in 2019. You can get online from me. This one's called Gun Show. I'm not really into guns, but I have a friend who wanted me to go to the gun show with him in Virginia Beach. And so I did, and it was quite an experience. So this is a kind of a mocking take on the gun situation, which if you guys are in Virginia know is taking up a lot more space in the media right now. Gun show. Easy maze of tables atop mammoth convention cement center floor. No music. Hovering murmur of haggling and hidden identities plus two rival tasers chirping for birds like territory. Handwritten flags shepherd sheeple. Republican governor candidate meet and greet next door to NRA brass in camo hats and black front teeth, zombie ammo, little girls' tutus, beef and deer jerky, fudge, survival kits of Alpo and rope and gas masks with landmine oxygen tanks, steel fields of extra cartridges and double stack magazines for AR-15s, carbon Winchester 308s with both eye sights, comes in black, pink, and wood grain rainbow, Glock 45 with fingerprint safeties and cell phone low holsters hidden 2 inches below the waist, church knives, bucks, butterflies, Damascus wave blades, silver maces, machetes, daggers, axes, samurai swords, waterboards, and one cannon from the Civil War for one lucky lady's front yard. Pregnant women, 3 people missing an eye, waddling 500-pound guys with beard and humpbacks, bald, ponytailed Vietnam vets in wheelchairs, raspy laughs reverse for fellow VFW, 1911s, Ruger revolver, long barrel and snub noses, pocket 38 Berettas, 40 Smith and Wessons, muskets and coffins, 44 Magnums, 30 30s, 22 single shooters, 400 lumen flashlights with more warnings than the guns, tons of live rounds, carrying cases, carrying permits, pretty and pattered, innocent until the moment of lethal, the World War II mumbler, the metal-faced chick in black wife beater with the bat tattooed to her chest, a lone woman wielding a walker with a shotgun vertically lodged, the other Kennedy shooter talking to the moonshine distributor in the corner near the emergency door, spitting, sunken-eyed tobacconists selling leather Confederate flags and grenades, shit talkers who dropped out of 8th grade opining on the value of time versus losing sales, rednecks of all races, bulletproof vests, lithium logs, safeties, Liberty safes big enough for 4 corpses, belts, buckles of Jefferson, Davis, and pro wrestlers, paper targets, t-shirt mantras, bumper stickers of Obama and Stalin, tall caps, blue overalls, blaze jackets, not a single hoodie, night vision, decisions of accepted debt and alleviated fear, zip ties save more than the Second Amendment, cops with deer in headlight eyes sit in the outside as buyers strut and lug stuff to their trucks, no background checks, no cash, cash only, no refunds, not responsible for nothing. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. I think that our technical problems are solved now, hopefully, but we're going to keep on moving in the reading portion of our evening. And thank you, everyone who's read so far. So a good thing there is Nathan, because I'm about to introduce Nathan. Nathan Richardson is a published author, performance poet, and Douglas historian. His poetry collections include Likeness of Being, 21 Imaginary T-shirts, and Voices from the Wombs of Wisdom. His work has been widely republished in anthologies, magazines, and newspapers such as the Channel Marker, the Cupola, Coastal Virginia Magazine, and the Washington Post. Nathan teaches a variety of workshops for emerging writers. Let's welcome Nathan to the stage. So unmute yourself, Nathan, and then you can go ahead and start. Perfect.
There you go. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this reading with some really stellar writers and teachers. And so I thought what I would share tonight are 3 poems from my most recent collection, Voices from the Wombs of Wisdom, which is yet to be published. I've been working on it for a few years. And all the poems are in the voices of, in the female voice, and celebrates the female voice. So what I will do is start by throwing up a verse from one of my famous female poets, my favorite female poets. It actually relates to the current debate over monuments. And what I have learned in my research is that monuments are really for the living. If you read letters and speeches of most of the historic people that we study and follow, they all did not want monuments. And so this actually is from a poem by Francis E.W. Harper entitled Bury Me in a Free Land. It's actually just the last verse of that, which makes reference to the monuments. It says, I ask no monument proud and high to capture the gaze of the vast passerby. All that my yearning spirit craves is to bury me not in a land of slaves. So, hey, if we listen to them, we probably wouldn't be arguing about the monuments that we want to these dead people. So the poems that I'll share are 3 poems. One that is most recently written. 2 of them are, you heard the name Gloria in the first 2 poems. The name Gloria is my great aunt, Gloria Elisa Adams, and wrote this first poem about 2 years ago. And I included her name in the poem. It relates to slavery as well as the current immigration situation. And then you'll hear the next poem that also includes her name. So the first poem is, goes as this. What you now call an Amber Alert was then known as a last seen, a notice of missing relatives printed in Black newspapers, reading the following to wit: public notice, last seen on the auction block in 1857, seeking the whereabouts of a Negro woman and her child. Gloria and Alita, chattel property, sold then sent in opposite directions. Gloria to a plantation in Galveston, Texas. The infant still nursing, left with an old slave woman named Odell. Both mother and child are of dark complexion. Gloria has a burn mark on her left forearm and scars across her back. She sent us a letter in 1865, the year after emancipation and a year before she would have known she was already free, saying she had escaped from Galveston to Mexico and while there birthed a daughter named Della. Now, a government agency reports 2 women and an infant boy of light complexion were last seen on the border. They were stopped by a border patrol on horses who took them in 3 different directions. Now the family is separated and baby Jonathan does not have his mother's milk. If anyone knows of their whereabouts, please contact this most anxious friend, Nathan McKinley Richardson of Suffolk, Virginia, a modern town once known as Nansemond County. Yes, thank you. And so the next poem, unfortunately, is an elegy poem from my Aunt Gloria. My grandmother, her sister, passed away about 3 years ago at the age of 92. And my Aunt Gloria, unfortunately, succumbed to COVID-19 in February. And so I wrote this poem for her. It's entitled The Seamstress. There are threads of your wisdom woven into our poetry, making the fabric stronger than corduroy. In the house you ran like a well-oiled sewing machine. You stitched ripped jeans, torn skin, threaded hope through the eye of a needle. And it was on your ironing board we learned how to keep on pressing until the rough times got smooth. Who but you could have taken a patchwork of little ragged souls and turned us into a colorful family quilt? Who fashioned us into models of character dignified while other styles trending came and went? It was you, Mama. It was you, Grandma. It was you, Auntie, friend. It was you, the seamstress. So that's the ode to my grandmother, Gloria. And so as I was saying, the poems in Voices from the Wombs of Wisdom are all about the female voice, celebrating the female voice in the voice of females. And this poem certainly celebrates the female voice. I know so many brilliant female poets' voices I've heard over the years. And I heard this poet recently. Female poet said she was nervous when she was getting ready to read, and so the second she said she was feeling some butterflies, the poem just popped in my head. But I want to note here something that poets often hold on to phrases or words, and they're just waiting for the opportunity to put them in a poem. And so I've got, this poem has that one word in it that I've been holding on to this for until I saw the commercial about 2 years ago about butter. It says, a dollop of daisies, a dollop of butter. And I always love that phrase. I love that word. And I said, one of these days I'm going to use a dollop of butter in a poem. So you'll hear that in this poem. It's called A Butterfly Recites a Poem. Stepping up to the mic, she said she was feeling some butterflies. And I've never seen butterflies with wings so big. Never imagined I'd be taken on a flight by a monarch on her migration across the Americas. Nervous, she must have forgotten that her wings and her heart were meant to move on the same beat. I was in a seat on the front row, saw her lips touch the open mic like she was kissing a dandelion in the mouth. And I swear I saw her fly right through and bend a rainbow. And later that night, in her tailwind, between her silhouette and the stars, there it was, her aurora borealis. This metamorphosis is not just your average makeover. It was much more magnificent than an ugly duckling turned swan. It was a moonshot that went clear around the sun. I was on a seat in the front row when her phoenix started rising, and I swear I saw her melt a man's ego like a dollop of butter on a frying pan. Please, don't mistake her dragonfly for her butterfly. Until now, I never even knew butterflies could talk. Now I know that a butterfly with a mouthful of nectar can spit poems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna keep it going. We have next up, we have Princess Perry, who received her MFA in fiction from Old Dominion University, where she now teaches. Her pieces, Favorite of Heaven and A Hard Bed, have been published in Quelly Journal. Sorry, my eyes are, I can't see some of the things on my computer. So let's welcome Princess Perry to the stage. Thank you, Princess.
Yeah. Ooh, my heart is beating so fast from those poems. Wow. I'm so
Amen.
I really am. My heart is beating so fast. This is new work. I hope it's not too new to read to you guys, but I've written it in the last couple of weeks. I'm working my way through my third revision of my manuscript. And this focuses on some of the themes that we've talked about. It focuses on slavery, but I think I'm trying to approach it from the point of view of not just family, but fathers also. We've heard a lot about mothers tonight. So the characters you just need to know are, the main characters are Andrew, Cabarrus, and Phoebe. And I found their names on, I did one of those genealogy, ancestry.com. So they're names of my great-grandparents. Most of the places are real. I hope I use them accurately. And the one thing that you need to know, Edmund, or Scarborough, the last name you're going to hear is Scarborough, and he's the plantation owner. And he's trying to make a deal with Andrew. Andrew's a free man now, and he owns some land over on the Eastern Shore. And my research showed me that there were a lot of Black families at one time who owned profitable land over there. There aren't anymore for various reasons, and you'll see Andrew is kind of in that same vein. But Andrew has offered money for his family but Scarborough does not want money. He wants the very valuable piece of land that Andrew owns. So I'll read you what I have. If Andrew woke in his wife's cabin on a Sunday morning, he rose first. He hauled and heated water for baths and coffee. He made cornmeal batter and fried it in the bacon fat Phoebe stored in a clay jar. In spring and summer, while the meal cooked, he sat on a chair by the open back door and smoked. His household awoke one by one to join him on the stoop. One of the children always came first until his lap was filled and one child leaned sleepily against each of his legs. Phoebe always came last, barefoot, her hair still tied in a rag, yet looking rested. They sent the children in to eat, but Andrew and Phoebe stayed on the porch. They took their first sip of coffee alone together. After breakfast, Andrew organized the children into a line, David at the head, then Ruth, Adeline, and the boys, George Lee and Will, according to age. Andrew fed each foot-dragging child a spoonful of vile castor oil to flush out worms and keep out cold. He kept a switch on the table near his left hand to scare them out of spitting. Swallow it, he would say in his commanding baritone as soon as their lips puckered. He hardly ever used the whip. Even Will, the 3-year-old, obeyed. Phoebe had to chase and capture them one by one when she wanted to give them a dose, but the children never ran from Andrew. Perhaps that was because he gave them more than medicine. Before his brief visits ended, Andrew would find a moment to take each girl or boy aside and gift the child with something found, sometimes made, something that put me in mind of you. The brilliant blue and green carcass of a dragonfly, a rock of sunrise colors, a blueberry bush seedling. You grow that and Mom'll make us a pie. He hid treats in his pockets, behind his ear, under his hat, and sometimes in his beard. The children climbed over him, prodded him. He nipped their searching fingers and poked into their armpits. The game always ended in squeals and a caution from Phoebe. You're gonna ruin them children. With Will on his hip, Andrew rose to touch her. Love ain't ruined you, have it? Sometimes Phoebe would roll her eyes or swat his hand from her hip. Sometimes she went sad, her gaze darting between the child, happy in his father's arms, and Andrew's joyful face. We'll see, she'd say. Love might be the thing that ruined me yet. If there were enough time, they would leave the children and go for a walk and talk through the plan again. Each birth had changed the timetable. If time were running short, Andrew would send David inside to care for the other children while he stood on the steps with Phoebe's face in his hands. Scarborough can't say no to cash forever, he promised. I'm gonna get y'all free. But a free man married to an enslaved woman cannot stand idle, making pledges for long. Andrew Cabarrus was not encouraged to linger, spreading his influence among the unfree. These visits were courtesies, dependent on the goodwill of Scarborough. So before he left, Andrew gathered a week's worth of wood. He hunted up a string of croaker, a possum, a bushel of corn, or a mud turtle still alive in the sack. He patched the wall chinks that filled the house with cold or mosquitoes. He fried corn cakes. He put coffee on to boil for his wife and fed his children castor oil. He crammed birthdays, remembrances, and milestones into the stingy hours between two sunrises. When he had done all the benevolence of white folks allowed, Andrew kissed his children and his wife and left them for another fortnight or month or more at the mercy of their master. That's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Princess.
Thank you.
So, according to our intern, I'm going to be reading something now. I'm next on the list, and I have to wear glasses because I'm working in a third floor attic office where the air conditioning has recently broken, and so in order to keep it cool, I have everything closed down except for one light. So I'm just going to read 3 short pieces. Oh, I guess I should introduce myself. If you came in late, my name is Michael Khandelwal. I am the executive director of the Muse Writers Center. I have the privilege to teach 2 great classes there with advanced fiction writers and advanced poets who, I mean, really, it's my honor to be with them because they are fantastic, and most of them are working on multiple books, and it's really great. I also oversee some of the operations at the Muse, but really I also try to do a lot of things in the community, and I'm on the Norfolk Arts Commission and the Norfolk Electoral Board, which I think is important work. I think we should all be, I'm speaking as a private citizen now, not as the executive director of the Muse. I think it's all very important that we engage civically and we try to lift each other up in the community through any means we can. So this first poem I'm going to read is, it's had many different versions. I wrote this poem originally in reaction to sort of the end of apartheid and some of the times where those who were challenging the evil system were very heavily oppressed. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who's a writer in Thailand, and he was talking to me about the language in Thai, and how in Thai, really almost the entire meaning is conveyed by a series of verbs, and so if you were to say, I put this glass on the table, it'd be more like the glass moving and the glass going through the air and the glass hitting the table, and it would be more about the action. So I thought about what the action of someone being hit, how I could describe that in a short poem. Later, I kind of edited it a little bit to sort of generalize it to more ethnic cleansing kind of things. So it's called Cleanse. The club, splintered and heavy, hovers in shadow for only a second. Swing rips the air, circling each head. Moving down, it finds a man alone in the dark stampede of flesh. Split by wood and sweat, the impact sweet like sulfur smashing. His face, dark with spits of blood, sees, opal eyes turned heavenward. Thank you. And this poem has no title. I wrote it, actually I wrote this poem and I found it just yesterday. I was looking through poems on the computer, and Tim Seibles, who will be reading for us in a few minutes, taught a class maybe 10 years ago at the Muse on short poems. And this was my attempt at a big ass American sentence, which is sort of reminiscent of the tanka or the renga. So instead of 31 syllables, we're dealing with 31 words. And I believe Tim partly invented this form. And I was thinking about the Los Angeles riots. Actually, it was 7 years ago, because I have a date on this piece of paper. Because I was living in Los Angeles during the riots, and I was living in what the police called the worst street in the Southwest Police Division. For most of my time there, and I lived there since I was a freshman, and I was in grad school when the riots happened. There would be gunfire every night. I mean, just every night, and so you become sensitized to it. And at first the house was broken into a lot of times, but then I started to try to meet the neighbors, and I was told by someone in a blood affiliated gang called the Harpies that the reason why they were breaking in is because we didn't respect our property, and if we respected it, they would respect it too. And I said, okay. But anyway, during the riots, we set up a neighborhood watch with our neighbors, because it was a pretty poor neighborhood, and there was one store on the corner that people in the neighborhood went to visit. And so we painted over their signs and just tried to come together. And that's after the Los Angeles riots, and I'll stop yammering about this and just read the poem in a second. That street went from the worst street in the police division in terms of crime and gunfire to the best. The church down the street started doing English classes after school or after work. The neighbors started to talk to each other and learn each other's languages. And it became a very vibrant community, and I was very proud. But during the riots, I just had this one moment where we were sitting outside all night, and down the street, a different street, we saw this truck coming back and forth and unloading things from the riots and then going back out for more. So here's my big ass American sentence. Fires just surrounded us, our lone cool block. Every hour men would unload diapers and televisions from a white truck, then race back to the riot that quaked our angelic city. And I think it's important that there was diapers and televisions. It was both things. And finally, the last poem I'll read, and it's also very short. I was part of the things I've done in my life, and I was an elector. I was in the Electoral College in 2008 in Virginia, and that year is the first year the Democratic electors were elected in 44 years. And I became president of the Electoral College in Virginia and had the honor of voting for President Obama, I guess then Senator Obama, at the state capitol. And we went to the inauguration, and it was amazing because I was staying with a friend just a couple miles from the capitol, and then we took a metro into Capitol South, and normally that trip would take about 10 minutes, and it took us almost 4 hours. It was so crowded. So this is a poem called Like Cattle to a Hopeful Pasture. On the way to the inauguration, I stand in the metro train pushed against the door as bodies press awkward and hard against me. The length of the train moves like dominoes, lurches fast and stops cold as we all reach for a desperate swallow of balance. I catch a woman against my shoulder as the train brakes hard between stations. My back cracks into the handrail. Don't lock your knees, she tells me. If you lock your knees, you'll pass out and I can't catch you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I haven't read that poem in a very long time. Well, 2008. So it is my great pleasure to next introduce Luisa A Igloria. Luisa is a Louis I. Jaffe Endowed Professor and University Professor of English and Creative Writing, and teaches on the faculty of the MFA Creative Writing Program at Old Dominion University, which she directed from 2009 to 2015, as well as at the Muse Writers Center, where she also serves as a member of its board of directors. We're very happy about that. Her books of poetry include The Buddha Wonders If She Is Having a Midlife Crisis, Ode to the Heart Smaller Than a Pencil Eraser, and 12 other books. Let's welcome Luisa A Igloria.
Thank you so much, Michael. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you reading for this program. One thing that has really struck me about this period of isolation from the pandemic is that there have been so many events offered by writers and musicians and artists, ballerinas. And what strikes me is really the generosity that comes out of those programs, people sharing their words and their art, which I think we need more than ever in these times. So it's all very inspiring. I go to Instagram or Facebook or wherever, and almost every day there's like 1 or 2 events at least. So thank you for continuing to organize things like this for us too, Michael. So I'm going to read, I guess, two new sort of unpublished poems. The first one newer than the others. And this is, this first poem, I've been looking at all of the different ways in which poets across America are addressing what we are going through. And many of the poems that I've read addressing this subject have been cast in the form of like a letter poem, an epistolary poem. So I thought I'd try to do a couple of those. And this is one of them, and it's called America. America You were the cousin who joined a beauty contest the year before her visa application cleared, so she could be a nurse somewhere in Rochester, New Jersey. She didn't think a roll of sheepskin inked with her name and St. Louis University would be enough. Soon after, she sent pictures of the doctor she would marry. America, we like to think there might have been love and not just the green card. We hear they're still together in their dotage. America, you were another cousin slowly dying from cancer, alone in an apartment in Maryland. I knew her only by name and the photographs she sent, her stylish bob, her cigarettes, and drugstore-bought dark glasses, the patent leather Mary Jane she sent one Christmas, the walking doll with flaxen hair, white lace bib and pinafore, the vacant eyes that opened and closed and give me nightmares even now. And you were a certain smell before we even began to understand what you really were, synthetic and abnormally clean, like Clorox or Windex, with a bottom note of soda left open in the sun. It wafted up from a box that took 2 months to ship from your flank or your hip or armpit. Wherever it was, people like us found neighborhoods where they could rent, walk-ups whose stairwells overflowed with steam from rice pots. America, we can shine and scrub your floors without a Hoover or a Roomba, then punch holes in the bottoms of fruit cocktail cans, and so we can grow bird chilies and tomatoes on the veranda. We let a dentist in our old hometown pull out all of our teeth so you wouldn't get the chance to do it and charge us triple. There is a fish we like to eat whose belly is soft and sweet and full of fat. But every bone in its body is a tree that bristles with more than a dozen spears. Like you, America, if we're not careful, we could choke on even the smallest mouthful. Thank you. Is it too dark where I am? I had to sit in the one place in the house where the internet is, the signal is strongest. So anyway, okay. This second poem I'm reading, I write also in the attempt to witness to some of the things that are happening in the Philippines, which is the country of my birth. I come from Baguio City in the northern part of the Philippines. And as you know, it's always also in the news lately for the terror bill, which has just been signed into law by Rodrigo Duterte, I think on the 3rd of July this month. And also the ongoing, the rise in the number of deaths from what they call the extrajudicial killings in Duterte's so-called drug war. So some of the human rights organizations, both domestic and local, peg the number of deaths from EJKs at somewhere between 27 and 30,000 by now, since he took office 3 years ago. So I wrote this poem for one of the victims of the EJK or extrajudicial killings. He was a high school student. Obviously, it was a setup. He was not a drug dealer or drug user, but I think the poem will speak to that as well. So this is called Elegy for the Slaughtered. In the country where now it is the darkest form of dark, every night has turned nightmare. There where demons think they have permission to freely take what they want from among us, every encounter is no longer rehearsal, but battle. In the lands where our foremothers sang through their teeth, through the air on wings of power, the cowardly erect barricades. They've outlawed Uber, though you might still be able to get a Grab. Merciless traffic lines for public transportation so long their measure could take you out of this world. I wish they would actually take you out of this world, where not even the most cautious child can find a sliver of clear moonlight to guarantee home. But let us sing anyway. Somewhere, someone winding and rewinding the closed circuit TV tape has come to the part where voices have doused the lamps in the alley, where it is shown how they turned the alley into a sink, fetid blood and liquids pooling toward a clotted drain. Oh, for the beating of wings to shrive what they try to hide in the pits of darkness. Collective hubbub beyond the tracks and open air markets where butchers wet their glistening wares with water. Animal jowls, flanks, and sweetbreads pulsing under bare light bulbs. The animal would first have been stunned with some kind of blow, rendered unconscious but not immediately dead. The throat might be slashed or a stake driven close to the heart, the liver, the spleen. A captive bolt pistol or conventional firearm might be fired into the animal's brain. On the tape, you might hear the boy as he pleads, not necessarily for his life, just for time. His concern about having enough night after this in which to memorize his lessons for a test. What is the shortest distance between 2 points, if not a line? His killers were heard goading him to hold a gun, fire it, then run. This is how animals are trussed tight for the final serve into the fire. It's how you know this is something they couldn't possibly have done to themselves. Thank you. That's a little grim. It's a little bit of darkness in this last poem I'm reading too, but hopefully it's on the verge of some hope, maybe. Certainly I was trying to address the idea of resistance, of not giving in completely. And this poem is coming in September from my next book from Southern Illinois University Press, Maps for Migrants and Ghosts. This poem is called How to Enter the Dark. When it is too quiet at night, I wonder what is troubling the waters, whether the banked clouds we saw at sundown, their colors rich but muted like a medieval tapestry, are merely a screen that hasn't risen yet on the next act. Will there be columns of smoke, towns going underwater, colonies of dead bees scattered like gold beads on the grass? When they announce evacuation orders, you look around and can't decide which of the things that could fit into one backpack could answer to the description of essential. Weren't you taught all is important to the living body, everything that could be grafted to it, as well as shorn away. And everything is also already in your heart. Memory of feasts made by hand that now your same hand empties the icebox off for fear of the power going out. The meat and butter going bad, the wilt and ruin of even the thinnest stalk of green. Regret, the wrapper around the gift that hasn't been torn open, that hasn't opened in you some stay on time. And at night, It's all you can do to not give in to the dark immediately, to count slowly, even as you enter it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce our last reader for the evening, but then after I introduce him and after he reads, we're going to have some time for a discussion. We're going to talk together, but also answer some questions that you might be posing on Facebook. So if you are watching this on Facebook, just in the comment section, feel free to ask some questions and our intern CR will send them to me and I'll ask the group after this reading. So let me introduce to you Tim Seibles. Tim Seibles is a newly retired professor of English at Old Dominion University, where he taught literature as well as classes in the MFA Creative Writing program. He is also an emeritus member of the board of directors of the Muse Writers Center, where he also teaches advanced workshops in poetry. He has been a workshop leader for Cave Canem, a writer's retreat for African American poets, and for the Hurston Wright Foundation, an organization dedicated to developing Black writers. He's the author of several collections of poetry, including Fast Animal, one of 5 poetry finalists for the 2012 National Book Award. In 2013, he received the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for poetry, also for Fast Animal. And he is the former poet laureate of Virginia. Let's welcome Tim Seibles. You'll have to unmute yourself, Tim. There you
How's
go.
that?
Perfect.
Am I in? All right.
You're in.
All right, good. Yeah, I could hear everybody. I just couldn't be heard for a while, but I could hear everyone else. So it was a real pleasure. I so love to hear good works read well. I imagine, as with most of you, we've been too alone for too long, man. And so this is good company. So I'm going to start off with a poem called Ode to the Banjo. I ended up doing some research on the banjo. I think a lot of people, because it is an instrument that is often associated with bluegrass music with white players, I think oftentimes it is forgotten that the banjo, of course, originates in Africa. So anyway, this is Ode to the Banjo. Not the cold night howl of the cello, not the soul-rolling scold of the sax, no flash fire frenzy of flamenco guitar, nor the oboe's hypnotic threnody. We all know your call, brother banjo, your sweet choirs of glee, the giggle of children spritzing your frets, that touch of puppy love, ecstatic and blue, each note quick, complete, as if your pot belly were already almost too full to speak. Where did you get that savory tang? How far have you traveled? What oceans, what ancient music still stashed in your magic bones? The ngoni, the lute-like zalam, the long-necked akonting, your African ancestors. The music is proof. The people who brought you here were more, always more than slaves. Your friendly notes, a gaggle of drunken bells, songbirds, small stars the lonely bring to light the coming dark. If a heartful song could unspill all the blood lost in this world, it would be yours. Your plucky laugh, your aria, so often misunderstood. How many centuries have you sprung into music? All the years, a single melody mapped in your grin. Who would dare mock your wise and supple ways? Only those who do not know that they do not know the truth for which you play. 5 fingers, 5 strings, 5 secrets, forever told, but never given away. Thank you. I see the clicks and sweetness out there. I've been working on a series of poems. Basically, I would call it that the poem is a living thing, in which the poem itself is a character in the poem. I'll read it to you. That might be the easiest way to understand it. The title of this poem goes right into the text of the poem. It had been a long time since the poem had seen a sunset. Trees, tall buildings, black against the burnt orange sky. The breeze soft like a sigh for a friend long dead. Nothing to do now but try to stay clean and think. The poem never tells anyone it had been incarcerated, which sounds like a way to cook meat. Afraid, always, kind of. Impossible not to remember certain faces, the hard quiet of men who crumbled like old bread. Even out here, this light, the feeling of being trapped, as if a country could itself be a cage. Something invisible, an idea, a germ, something had worked on everybody. Night now. The poem looks back at the city, sees the moon not up, two headlights shivving the dark. This is a villanelle. It's called The Looking Glass Blues and Buried Villanelle. And the epigraph is with Gil Scott-Heron in mind. Most of you know Gil Scott-Heron. The revolution will not be televised, but he wrote all kinds of poems. So I wrote this kind of with his kind of posture in mind. Look how quick tomorrow turns back into the past. My mind's on spin, my heart's on the dole. Can't say for sure, but aren't we through the looking glass? Don't know what to call it, but something's coming fast. Did we let the White House get eaten by a troll? Watch how soon tomorrow begins to like the past. Ever wonder why and how this shit got on a roll? Maybe we should get away from through the looking glass. Singing for my supper, 'cause I need a little cash. Got a big ass tick sucking on my soul. What makes all the fascists start dressing up the past? If I had a starship, honey, you know I'd warp the gas. See how sweet and easy a nation can get stole? I know you know ain't nothing new about the looking glass. It ain't like big time money been shucking on a fast. Donning velvet shoes and skinny blue jeans for a stroll. Watch how soon tomorrow skips back into the past. To me, feels like the whole damn world has got a goddamn rash. How'd the Secret Service never see the grassy knoll? Whoever took that shot was hid behind the looking glass. Believing it'll be all right makes you a simple ass. Who cranks up the war machine then jobs us for the toll. Watch how quick your Twitter life flips sides into the past. Wish I knew a sexy way to break the looking glass. This is another poem in which the poem is a character. From that series, the poem is a living thing. The title goes right into the body of the poem. The sun shone like most days in May, and some Republican senators stopped to watch the smoke thicken and twist in the steady wind. A few pointed, some half smiled as if they weren't sure exactly how to feel. Even though it was on fire, the poem sat stone still in the street. Even with the acrid smell, even as the poem's face turned to ash and fell away. Most thought this was just one more trick, a well-played trope setting up the poem to make another impossible comeback. Raising its fist, traffic be damned, baring its breast, saying what poems usually say about war, about sex, and the soul in anguish, about the way this country fills its maw with Black bodies. But the poem, sitting in the lotus, did not blink or move or seem to notice the unhappy cars, the well-fed White House lawn, or the curious tourists aiming their phones for a selfie, smoke in their hair, heat wrinkling the light behind them. The poem never said why it turned to fire for its final word. Maybe it was all the years of getting up, getting dressed, tuning its throat, only to find itself disappeared in America. Jabba the Hutt, commander-in-chief, with a bowl of drool in his hand, and still the raucous cheers, still the red caps rallying like a virus. There's only so much a poem can do in solitary before it's just alone, humming to itself among things half forgotten, blurred, broken, boxed, and stashed beneath the well-washed minds. Why not fire? Why not make Fox and CNN and Meet the Press ask why? Just one day of good suits and serious faces discussing who it was. Who did the poem think it was? But the poem isn't thinking about itself. The poem isn't thinking anything. This is me talking, me watching while the poem burns. Thank you. That's good. I'm good.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna ask everyone to unmute yourselves, and Sierra, our intern, will put us all on the screen, I'm assuming. And let's start talking about what we've just heard and also what we've been experiencing recently. I know we've had a lot going on this year. So we have a movement that's happening to shine the light on equality, which is, we've been trying to shine this light for hundreds, if not thousands of years in our society. So how do you think, and anyone can start us off, how do you think that we as writers can inform the culture? How do you think we can make them pay attention?
Yeah, well, to me, it's not, I mean, equality is certainly a lovely concept, but it doesn't feel like that's what the movement's about as much as it is about finally inviting people to recognize the humanity of people who are not white. This is not to say that's a new idea either, but that it seems, I mean, when you watch the murder of George Floyd, this very slow, deliberate murder, I mean, it's just kind of unbelievable in a certain kind of way. And I think that's why white people, I think, reacted very strongly. I mean, not to say there aren't, you know, sympathetic whites, and there haven't been sympathetic whites before, but that I think that particular kind of killing really woke up something about the ugliness that lay beneath the American smile, right? I mean, Trump is an emblem of the ugliness, but the ugliness, you know, is insidious in its many places, right? And I think part of what the movement's about is about finally coming to grips with the ugliness that is really infecting the society.
Yeah, you know, it's also interesting that now we have people who are capturing these horrible, ugly moments so that people's eyes are opened. You know, I remember I was earlier talking about the LA riots, which were kind of, Rodney King was one of the first people we saw on video being treated badly for really no reason justifying how he was treated. And now it seems like it's overwhelming how many instances we see every day of people being treated with ugliness. Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Tim.
To add to what,
Please.
excuse me, to add to what both of you have just said, Tim and Michael, what has struck me too is that there are so many resonances, reverberations that come from, you know, a far deeper place, centuries, you know, before this moment, welling up in the violence that we are experiencing and witnessing every day. For instance, when people are talking about tearing down statues and monuments to colonialism, I think, you know, of my own history as a Filipino American in a country which has had encounters, violent encounters with America that predated my own physical arrival in this country. So there's no evading any of this. And I think that it's far bigger than any localization that we might think of here in America in terms of what we may be confronting in our own communities. All of these connections go way back and go deeper than any of us.
What I think about is just to kind of piggyback off of what Luisa said, one of the things that I find doing research that I had no idea about was how many African Americans and how many free slaves did own land over on the Eastern Shore, and how little by little they were dispossessed of that land. And I think, again, all of those historical wrongs are buried. And if we don't go looking for them, we don't find them. But the George Floyd video is right there in our faces. And I think it's like part of a continuum. Right now, we don't have to do the hunt for what we know is there. It's there. That video puts it right in our faces. But before, you had to make an effort, more of an effort, to find out where these wrongs and where these animosities came from. So that's all I'd like to add. Yeah.
Nathan, would you like to say?
Yeah, from my perspective, I want to start out. I heard a young man, a poet from Richmond, who was introducing a poem he wrote shortly after George Floyd. And he said, this poem is 3 weeks old, but the pain is 400 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, wow, young man, you just hit it on the head, you know. So what I see from my perspective as a historian really is people, really what happened is that the cart is in the ditch now. The way that I explained it when I was in DC and Lincoln Park, and I was talking to Black Lives Matter people, protesters, is that the cart is in the ditch. The squeaky wheel has not been oil. America has refused to put any oil on the wheel. And now the cart is in the ditch and they are blaming the wheel when they should be blaming themselves, because you could have put some oil on the wheel and we would not be in the ditch, you know. So, you know, if you are flabbergasted by the violence we see, I can only go to what Douglas said. You know, the thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion. The thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion.
That's very, very true.
Yeah, amen, amen. That was great.
You know,
yeah.
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
No. I was just saying, yeah, I think what Nathan said about, you know, the only thing worse than rebellion is what causes it. I mean, I don't know. What heartened me about this latest round of protests, even though I realized some of it became violent and there's mixed reasons for that, whatever, I do think it's important that many people of many different complexions were out there saying, we cannot have a country like this. And I was telling my students some years ago, I said, you know, when Trayvon Martin was killed, we saw a rash of multicultural protests. And I told my students, when I was your age, something happened to a Black person, Black people protested. White people just kind of stood there and said, well, boy, what a shame. You know, so I'm heartened by the idea that people are beginning to see that, as King said, and King was always a huge figure in my life, you know, our destinies are all tied together. If the country is toxic for Black folks, it's toxic for white people.
For everyone.
You know what I mean? Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I could go crazy on this stuff.
That's I think the crux of it, because I think in white culture, perhaps, or other cultures, people just didn't know what was happening, and they might hear a story. Oh, well, that's an isolated incident, but now we're seeing it's not isolated; it's continual, and I think that's what technology has helped us with. Someone, I forget who it was, read something with the line, "The revolution will not be televised." Well, no, it's going to be televised. I think that's what's happening right now. Before we continue on, I just want to say, if you're watching on Facebook, we have a few minutes left. And if you have a question, put it in the comments, and then Sarah will let me know. I have not seen any questions passed to me as yet. But we haven't heard from Daniel yet, if you have any thoughts about what we've been talking about.
Well, first of all, I would say sometimes there's a time to shut up and listen. That's always a good idea.
Okay.
Second of all, I want to respect how much courage the protesters have by protesting during a pandemic.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible, actually. That takes such, I mean, that's not just risking your freedom, that's risking your life. And that's a whole nother level. So I respect that, and I wish them well. That's what I would like to say, is Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People are apparently.
I'd like to also.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to also say what Tim was talking about the diversity of people in the streets right now. Some people have been surprised by it. I actually was not really that surprised by it, and I was not surprised by it, especially the young people, because for the last 8 years, I've been involved in the Youth Speaks Brave New Voices International Poetry Slam. And so over those 8 years, we've been in about 7 different cities. with teams of young people, young poets coming in from, on average about 35 different states, 10 or 15 different countries, Cape Town, South Africa, Leeds, England, Guam. These are teams of young people coming together, and to sit there and listen to those poems, and they all have this commonality that they are being oppressed. Young people in 12 were being oppressed, and they were voicing their concerns then. And so to see them come off the stage and live and wax poetic in the street is something that I expected them to do, because they were brave enough to stand up and say these poems, right? And now they're brave enough to go out in the street and stand behind the intent of their poetry. So I just applaud the young poets, the young people that are out there in the street. I'm too old to do it, so it's their turn.
Well, speaking of young poets, so what would each of you like to say to the young poets coming up now, learning their craft now, wanting to make a difference with their words?
Well, I mean,
Or young writers.
I mean, I would gladly speak to that. I mean, the thing that you had mentioned earlier, you'd asked us what we thought poetry could do to, in some way, support this movement, this social transformation. And so I think it's the same thing. The answer to that question is the same as this question. The young poets, we want them to be honest. We want them to be daring. We want them to be attentive to the difficulties in the society. This is not to say we can't love flowers and birds, of course, but there are so many things that we have to deal with in terms of how human beings are treating each other. I mean, that they must be attentive to these things. That was what I would tell poets. Of course, I would say craft-wise, read other poets, think hard about what language does. But in terms of the way you use your attention, you attend to things that matter deeply, and the condition of our lives, Black lives, all lives are important. And if you attend to that, you're probably going to create a poetry that has deep resonance. And that's what I would say. That's one of the things I would say.
I want to piggyback off of what Tim is saying about paying attention, which is very important. I also would want to say, don't be afraid to feel deeply. The intensity of feeling is sometimes bewildering, frightening. I think we have all felt all the feels, as they say these days.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So to not be afraid to meet those feelings and to not be afraid of meeting them with what we have.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, it's so important, because poetry, I think what it teaches us is the idea that we can try to come closer and closer to what it might feel like to inhabit another person's skin or place or interiority. And literature is great because that's the only way I think we can approach that.
Yes.
Music, art, poetry, those are all the ways we can feel deeply and try to come close to someone else's experience.
Yes.
I very much agree. And one of the interesting things is poetry and fiction, nonfiction, creative writing. I feel like it explodes around times like this.
Yeah.
When I was in graduate school, 25,000 years ago, Yevgeny Yevtushenko came, and he was talking about how under the Soviet regime, he would put a book out and there would be 400,000 copies that were sold. And then when the wall came down, he maybe sold 1,000 because, people needed that. I mean, in his case, it was almost coded subversive things against Soviet fascism. But that shows me that the voice that we can offer will find an ear and will find resonance around there. And if we can be a voice that shows the way, that would be a wonderful thing. Let me just check and see if we have any questions yet. I think people are just transfixed with what we're saying and not wanting to interrupt us. But we are a little bit actually after the time we said we would end. So I'd just like to give the opportunity for everyone to share a final thought. And I'll call on Daniel first, because Daniel's the first one on my screen for right now. So
I would just want to say one quick thing, that in terms of writers and things, writers are not obligated to write about the current events of politics or whatever. If writers want to focus on other things like love or beauty or the ocean or whatever, they should. Do not be overly fixated on, I don't know, the current events of our country and their terrible person in charge there. Yeah. Okay. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay, great. Nathan.
Bouncing off of him. All poetry is political.
Okay, I hear you then.
Even the love poem says, "Vote for me." Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Cool.
Princess, any final thoughts for us?
I would just say, and I think this is perhaps because of where I am in my writing and with what I'm doing right now, is that you just have to stick with it, even on the days when it is really hard, and even on the days when it doesn't feel like you're doing a very good job. Stick with it, and I think that you will surprise yourself. You just need one good sentence to make it a good day. Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Louisa.
I guess I just want to say that what this time has shown us and is teaching us is that nature might provide for us. We think the world might provide for us, but we don't have control over it. We don't own it. And I guess the second thing I might want to say is that, besides ourselves, other beings take up space in this world. So we're all connected. Nothing is unimportant.
Yeah.
Amen. Tim, a final thought for
Yeah,
us.
no, I would, Luisa had said earlier something about feeling deeply.
Yeah.
And that to me is a really critical
Yeah.
thing, because partly what happens when you're confronted with the kind of infection that the country is dealing with, and I'm talking political infection, not the virus, is that your inclination is to be numb, to say, oh, the hell with it, I don't want to deal with that. I'm just going to watch. I'm going to watch a sitcom. But I think we have to be vulnerable to our rage, are vulnerable to our sorrow, vulnerable to the fact that we want a better world, and that world is not going to come soon. But it will propel us in a certain way in terms of how we approach not only our writing, but our lives. You can't live with your heart in a small box,
right?
And so I think following up on what several people said, poetry teaches us how to feel. And invites us to feel with other people. That's critical about, being with other people, whether it's a love poem or a fucking protest poem. The idea that we are sharing this time together as people who are lonely and frightened and happy and whatever else, that's really critical part of art, all art, all of it. That's it. Not saying nothing else.
And I'll say, just based on kind of riffing off what you just said, that we are going through an unprecedented or 100-year pandemic as well, which causes people to feel more deeply, I think, and exposes us in ways that we aren't used to. It makes us feel vulnerable. And then we have this social and political change, I hope positive change, coming. But we're often alone in our thoughts, and like you said, Tim, you could watch a sitcom, and I've watched a couple sitcoms, because sometimes you need a sitcom.
Me too.
But also it gives you time to reflect, and it gives you time to say, I can put my energy this way, or I can put my love this way. And I think that we're in a unique time. I think that even though there's so many things that people might say are bad that are happening at once, because it's actually causing us to be a bit raw. When you're a bit raw, when your patterns are thawing and no longer solid, that's when change can come. You know,
Yeah.
that's when change can come.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, I just want to thank all of you so much for being here today. I want to thank Desiree Cooper, who showed us the video earlier, Remica, Bingham, Risher, who I think had to leave a little bit earlier, Daniel Pearlman, Nathan Richardson, Princess Perry, Luisa A Igloria, and Tim Seibles. I very much appreciate, and the Muse very much appreciates you being here for this
It
important
was great. It
and
was
fun
great.
time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michael.
Michael.
It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
everybody.
Before we
Really
close, I want to say that, again, the Muse Writers Center, if you're watching this on our website or on Facebook, you can find information about us pretty easily. We still have about 40 classes remaining this semester, and that you are welcome to take some. And we have tuition assistance, which if you can't afford a class, no matter what your situation, we will find a way to put you in that class and help you with the tuition. And also tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Diane Zinna's debut novel's book launch will be here live on Facebook. And I want to thank Sierra Foltz, if Sierra wants to put her video on for a second so we can see her. And there she is. Sierra is our intern. She has been with us all summer, and she's been a blessing to the Muse Writers Center, and we appreciate you and wish you well as you go back to college. And I also want to thank those of you who are at home or in the car or in in your backyard or wherever you might be watching this. I hope this has been an edifying time to you. I hope it's a time that has made you think and has given you something good to do on a Friday night, and share it with us. We appreciate you sharing your time with us. Again, thank you all so much. We'll see you again very soon.
Bye.
Peace.